Imagine waking up every morning knowing that your every move, word, and gesture will be scrutinized by millions. Picture a life where something as simple as crossing your legs the wrong way could spark international headlines, or where eating a single shellfish could be considered a dangerous rebellion against centuries of tradition. This is the reality that Catherine, Princess of Wales, faces every single day. Behind the glittering tiaras and designer gowns lies a world governed by invisible chains, rules so ancient and absolute that they dictate everything, from how she holds her teacup to whom she can befriend. While the world sees a fairy tale princess living a life of luxury, the truth is far more complex. Catherine exists within a golden cage, bound by 20 specific restrictions that most people could never imagine having to follow. These aren't mere suggestions or guidelines, they are ironclad traditions that have shaped the British monarchy for over 1,000 years. Break them, and risk not just personal embarrassment, but potential constitutional crisis. From the moment she married Prince William, Catherine unknowingly signed an invisible contract that would govern her life in ways she never anticipated. What happens when a modern woman must navigate medieval expectations? How does someone maintain their identity while conforming to rules that seem to belong in another century? The answer lies in understanding the delicate balance Catherine strikes every day between being herself and being royal, a balance that comes at a price most of us could never imagine paying. Catherine Elizabeth Middleton thought she understood what marrying into the royal family would mean. She had watched from the sidelines for years, seen the cameras follow every royal move, witnessed the careful choreography of public appearances, but nothing could have prepared her for the moment when she realized that her morning cup of tea would forever be different from everyone else's. The revelation came during her first official breakfast at Buckingham Palace as the newly minted Duchess of Cambridge. As Catherine reached for her teacup in what felt like the most natural way possible, she noticed a subtle but unmistakable shift in the room. The palace staff exchanged glances. Her lady-in-waiting cleared her throat almost imperceptibly. It was then that Catherine learned her first harsh lesson about royal life. Even something as simple as how she held her teacup was now subject to centuries-old protocol. The teacup incident would prove to be just the tip of the iceberg. Within weeks of her marriage to Prince William, Catherine discovered that her life was now governed by a complex web of restrictions that touched every aspect of her existence. These weren't written down in some royal handbook that she could study and memorize. Instead, they were passed down through generations, embedded in traditions so deeply that breaking them wasn't just considered inappropriate. It could be seen as an act of rebellion against the crown itself. The first restriction that truly shocked Catherine was learning that she could never, under any circumstances, turn her back on the Queen. This meant that during family gatherings, formal events, or even casual encounters, Catherine had to master the art of walking backwards, maintaining eye contact, and gracefully retreating without ever appearing rude or awkward. The skill required was immense. She had to learn to navigate furniture, steps, and crowds while moving in reverse, all while maintaining the perfect posture and serene expression that the public expected from a royal. During her first Christmas at Sandringham, Catherine experienced this restriction firsthand. As the family gathered for their traditional holiday celebrations, she found herself trapped in conversations, unable to naturally end them and move to speak with others. Every exit required careful planning, strategic positioning, and sometimes the intervention of other family members to create the right moment for her to gracefully withdraw without turning her back on Her Majesty. The second major restriction came as an even bigger surprise. Catherine could never publicly express political opinions or preferences. This wasn't just about avoiding controversial statements during interviews. It meant that every charity she chose to support, every cause she championed, and every public appearance had to be carefully vetted to ensure it couldn't be interpreted as taking a political stance. When Catherine wanted to speak out about mental health awareness, teams of advisors had to ensure that her advocacy wouldn't align too closely with any political party's platform. This restriction became particularly challenging during her first major solo engagements. Catherine had always been passionate about early childhood development, but she discovered that even this seemingly non-political cause had to be approached with extreme care. Every speech had to be reviewed multiple times, every statistic checked and double-checked to ensure it couldn't be seen as criticism of government policy. The spontaneous, authentic advocacy she had envisioned was replaced by carefully choreographed appearances where every word was measured and approved. The third restriction that fundamentally changed Catherine's daily life was the prohibition against physical contact with the public. While other celebrities could hug fans, shake hands freely, or engage in warm, tactile interactions, Catherine had to maintain a careful distance. Handshakes were acceptable, but only when initiated properly. Hugs were generally forbidden except in very specific circumstances, usually involving children or during particularly emotional charity visits, and even then, they had to be brief and appropriate. This restriction proved especially difficult during Catherine's hospital visits and charity work. She would meet families going through tremendous hardship, children facing serious illnesses, and individuals who clearly needed comfort and human connection. Every fiber of her being wanted to reach out, to offer the physical comfort that comes naturally in such situations, but protocol demanded restraint. She had to find ways to convey warmth and empathy through her words, expressions, and presence, while maintaining the physical boundaries that centuries of royal tradition demanded. Catherine learned to navigate this restriction by developing an incredibly expressive communication style. She mastered the art of conveying deep empathy through her eyes, using her voice to provide comfort, and positioning herself in ways that felt warm and approachable while maintaining appropriate distance. Staff members noted how she would often lean in slightly during conversations, creating intimacy without crossing physical boundaries, and how she developed a way of speaking that made people feel heard and valued even without physical contact. The fourth major restriction involved Catherine's wardrobe choices, but in ways that went far beyond simply looking appropriate. Every outfit had to be carefully considered not just for style and appropriateness, but for its potential political, social, and economic implications. If she wore something too expensive, she risked appearing out of touch with ordinary people. If she wore something too casual, she could be seen as not respecting the dignity of her position. If she chose a designer from one country over another during international visits, it could be interpreted as showing favoritism. The complexity of this restriction became apparent during Catherine's first major international tour. Every outfit for the trip had to be planned months in advance, with backup options prepared for different weather conditions, cultural considerations, and potential schedule changes. Local designers from the countries being visited had to be included to show respect and support, but balanced with British designers to show national pride. Colours had to be considered for their cultural significance, necklines checked for appropriateness, and hemlines measured to ensure they met both local customs and royal standards. Perhaps most challenging was the restriction on Catherine's food choices during public events. Royal protocol dictated that she couldn't eat shellfish, rare meat, or dishes with garlic due to potential health risks, and the practical consideration of maintaining pleasant breath during public interactions. But the restrictions went deeper than safety concerns. Catherine had to eat slowly and gracefully, couldn't be photographed with food in her mouth, and had to master the art of appearing to enjoy every meal while actually eating very little in public. This became particularly evident during state banquets and cultural exchanges, where food was an important part of diplomatic relations. Catherine would be presented with elaborate local delicacies that she was expected to appreciate and enjoy, but she had to do so while following strict royal dining etiquette. She couldn't show preference for one dish over another, couldn't request seconds of anything she particularly enjoyed, and had to maintain conversation throughout the meal while navigating complex dining protocols that varied depending on the cultural context of each event. The sixth restriction that profoundly impacted Catherine's life was the prohibition against showing strong emotions in public. While she could smile, laugh appropriately, and show measured concern or sympathy, she couldn't display anger, frustration, excitement, or grief in ways that regular people might consider normal and healthy. This emotional restraint was expected not just during formal royal duties, but at all times when she might be photographed or observed by the public. Catherine discovered the weight of this restriction during her first major royal crisis. When faced with intense media scrutiny and public criticism, she had to maintain her composure completely. She couldn't show frustration with unfair coverage, couldn't express anger at invasion of privacy, and couldn't display the natural human emotions that anyone would feel under such circumstances. Instead, she had to project calm confidence and gracious acceptance, even when dealing with situations that would understandably upset anyone. The seventh and perhaps most personally challenging restriction was the limitation on her friendships and social relationships. Catherine couldn't maintain the same casual friendships she had enjoyed before marriage. Every person she spent time with was now subject to security clearances, background checks, and careful consideration of how their association might reflect on the royal family. Friends couldn't visit spontaneously, couldn't share details of their interactions on social media, and had to understand that their relationship with Catherine would forever be different from normal friendships. This restriction became painfully apparent when Catherine tried to maintain relationships with her university friends and pre-royal social circle. People who had once been casual acquaintances found themselves thrust into a world of NDAs, security protocols, and media attention they never wanted. Some friendships couldn't survive the pressure and formality that now surrounded even the most basic social interactions. Catherine had to learn to form new types of relationships within the constraints of royal life, finding ways to maintain authentic connections while accepting that true equality and casual intimacy were no longer possible in most of her relationships. As Catherine settled into her role as a senior royal, she began to understand that the restrictions she faced went far beyond public appearances and social etiquette. The eighth restriction she encountered changed how she could experience one of life's most fundamental activities: travel. Catherine discovered that she could never travel anywhere without extensive advance planning, security sweeps, and diplomatic considerations that turned even the simplest trips into complex international operations. When Catherine expressed a desire to take a spontaneous weekend trip with William and their young children, she learned that such simple pleasures were now impossible. Every destination required months of preparation involving multiple government departments, security agencies, and diplomatic offices. Hotels had to be thoroughly investigated, travel routes planned with military precision, and local authorities coordinated at every level. The romantic idea of jumping in a car for an impromptu family getaway was replaced by the reality of motorcades, security details, and itineraries planned down to the minute. This restriction became particularly poignant during family emergencies. When Catherine's grandfather fell seriously ill, her immediate instinct was to rush to his bedside as any granddaughter would. Instead, she found herself waiting for security arrangements to be made, diplomatic protocols to be observed, and official permissions to be granted. By the time all the necessary arrangements were completed, precious time with her beloved grandfather had been lost to bureaucratic necessities that ordinary families never have to consider. The ninth restriction that deeply affected Catherine was the prohibition against expressing personal preferences or making spontaneous choices in public settings. During official engagements, she couldn't simply choose what she wanted to eat from a menu, couldn't express preference for one activity over another, and couldn't show genuine enthusiasm that might seem to favor one person or organization over others. Every response had to be measured, diplomatic, and carefully neutral. This became evident during Catherine's visits to schools and community centers, where children and organizers would naturally ask about her favorite activities, foods, or interests. What should have been delightful, spontaneous conversations with young people became carefully navigated diplomatic exercises. Catherine had to find ways to engage authentically with children, while never expressing preferences that might disappoint those offering different options, or that might be interpreted as royal endorsements. During one memorable visit to a children's hospital, Catherine was presented with artwork created by young patients, each hoping their piece would be her favorite. Instead of being able to express genuine preference and joy in a particular child's work, she had to find ways to appreciate each piece equally, praising different aspects of every artwork to ensure no child felt less valued. While this showed remarkable sensitivity and training, it also highlighted how even the most natural human impulses had to be channeled through royal protocol. The 10th restriction involved Catherine's relationship with technology and social media. Unlike other public figures who could share personal thoughts, behind-the-scenes moments, or spontaneous reactions online, Catherine's digital presence was entirely managed by palace communications teams. She couldn't post personal photos, share unfiltered thoughts, or engage in the casual online interactions that had become normal for her generation. This restriction was particularly challenging for someone who had grown up in the early days of social media and had enjoyed sharing life moments with friends and family online. Catherine had to adjust to a reality where every digital interaction was planned, reviewed, and approved by multiple people before being shared with the world. The spontaneous joy of sharing a beautiful sunset, a funny moment with the children, or a personal achievement was replaced by carefully curated content designed to support royal messaging and maintain appropriate dignity. The restriction became more complex as her children grew older and began asking why their mother couldn't share photos of their achievements, family outings, or special moments the way their friends' parents did. Catherine had to explain to Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis why their family operated under different rules than everyone else they knew, trying to help them understand without making them feel burdened by their unique circumstances. Catherine's 11th restriction involved her inability to have private medical appointments or health experiences. Every medical visit, from routine checkups to more serious health concerns, became a matter of palace business, involving multiple staff members, security considerations, and often public speculation. She couldn't simply pop into her local doctor's office or handle health concerns as a private individual. This restriction became particularly significant during Catherine's pregnancies and the challenges she faced with severe morning sickness. What should have been private medical experiences shared only with her husband and healthcare providers instead became public knowledge, with every hospital visit generating media coverage and public speculation. Catherine had to manage serious health challenges while maintaining public appearances, attending royal duties when possible, and dealing with the additional stress of public scrutiny during vulnerable times. The 12th restriction that surprised Catherine was her limited ability to support friends and family members during their personal crises. When people close to her faced difficulties, scandals, or public challenges, Catherine's response had to be carefully measured to avoid creating additional problems for the royal family. She couldn't simply stand by friends publicly or offer the kind of unconditional support that would be natural in normal relationships. This became particularly painful when family members faced media scrutiny or personal difficulties. Catherine had to balance her natural instincts to protect and support loved ones with the reality that her public association with controversial situations could create diplomatic or constitutional problems. She learned to offer support privately while maintaining appropriate public distance, a delicate balance that often left her feeling like she was abandoning people who needed her most. The 13th restriction involved Catherine's charitable work and advocacy, which couldn't be driven purely by personal passion or immediate response to need. Every charitable association had to be carefully vetted for political implications, potential conflicts with other royal patronages, and long-term sustainability. Catherine couldn't simply see a need and respond to it. Every charitable commitment required extensive research, planning, and approval processes. When Catherine learned about a small local charity doing remarkable work with disadvantaged children, her immediate impulse was to visit, volunteer, and help promote their efforts. Instead, she discovered that supporting this organization would require months of background checks, coordination with other royal patronages to avoid overlap, and careful consideration of how her involvement might affect the charity's relationship with government funding and other supporters. The 14th restriction that affected Catherine daily was the requirement to maintain perfect grooming and appearance at all times when in public view. This went beyond simply dressing appropriately. It meant that every hair had to be in place, makeup had to be flawless, and not a single element of her appearance could suggest anything less than complete composure and perfection. This restriction became particularly challenging during long public engagements in difficult weather conditions, emotional charity visits, or physically demanding royal duties. Catherine had to master techniques for maintaining perfect appearance during outdoor events in wind and rain, after hours of handshaking and public interaction, and even during emotionally difficult visits where natural human responses might affect her physical composure. The 15th restriction involved Catherine's inability to discuss or reference popular culture, entertainment, or contemporary issues in ways that regular people take for granted. She couldn't express opinions about television shows, movies, music, or celebrities, couldn't reference current trends or social media phenomena, and had to be extremely careful about any comments that might be interpreted as endorsements or criticisms of popular culture. This restriction became evident during Catherine's interactions with young people, who naturally wanted to connect with her through shared cultural references. When visiting schools or youth organizations, students would mention favorite movies, music artists, or social media trends, hoping to find common ground with the princess. Catherine had to find ways to engage with young people's interests without ever expressing personal preferences or opinions that might be seen as royal endorsements. The 16th restriction that Catherine discovered was her limited ability to handle money or make personal financial transactions in public. Royal protocol dictated she couldn't be photographed handling cash, making purchases, or engaging in normal financial transactions. The seemingly small restriction had significant implications for how she could interact with vendors, local businesses, and community organizations during public engagements. During market visits or local business tours, Catherine couldn't simply purchase items she admired or make spontaneous donations to causes she encountered. Every financial transaction had to be handled by staff members, creating a barrier between her and the normal economic interactions that connect people to their communities. This restriction highlighted how royal protocol could create distance even during events designed to bring the royal family closer to ordinary people. The 17th restriction affected Catherine's ability to express physical discomfort or fatigue during public appearances. Regardless of how she felt physically, whether dealing with illness, exhaustion, pregnancy symptoms, or physical pain, Catherine had to maintain a composed, energetic appearance throughout all public engagements. This became particularly challenging during the long days that royal tours and state visits required. Catherine learned to manage physical discomfort, hunger, thirst, and fatigue, while maintaining perfect posture, genuine engagement with everyone she met, and the appearance of boundless energy and interest. She developed techniques for finding moments of rest during events, managing physical needs discreetly, and pushing through discomfort without allowing it to show in her face or demeanor. The 18th restriction involved Catherine's relationship with the media and her inability to respond to coverage of herself or her family. Unlike other public figures who could defend themselves against unfair reporting, correct misconceptions, or share their side of stories, Catherine had to maintain silence even when faced with inaccurate or hurtful media coverage. This restriction proved particularly difficult when coverage affected her children or family members. Catherine had to watch as newspapers and magazines speculated about her parenting, her relationships, and her personal choices without being able to respond or correct false information. The natural instinct to defend herself and protect her family's reputation had to be suppressed in favor of royal dignity and the traditional policy of never complaining or explaining. The 19th restriction that shaped Catherine's daily life was her inability to make spontaneous social commitments or accept invitations without extensive vetting and planning. Every social engagement, from children's birthday parties to casual dinners with friends, required security assessments, schedule coordination, and careful consideration of protocol implications. This meant that Catherine couldn't accept last-minute invitations, couldn't commit to social events without knowing all attendees and security implications, and couldn't maintain the kind of flexible, spontaneous social life that most people consider normal. Every social interaction required planning and approval, turning natural friendship activities into formal engagements that required the same level of preparation as official royal duties. The 20th and most profound restriction that Catherine faced was perhaps the hardest to define but the most pervasive in its impact on her life. She could never simply be herself without considering how every action, word, and choice reflected on centuries of tradition and the future of the monarchy. Every moment of her life had become a performance, not in the sense of being fake or insincere, but in the sense that authenticity itself had to be carefully managed and channeled through the lens of royal responsibility. This final restriction encompassed all the others, while adding an additional layer of complexity that touched every aspect of Catherine's existence. She couldn't have a bad day without considering how her mood might affect public perception of the royal family. She couldn't make mistakes without understanding that her errors would be magnified and analyzed as reflections of royal competence. She couldn't simply exist as Catherine Middleton. She had to constantly balance being Catherine with being the Princess of Wales, and later, preparing to be Queen. The weight of this restriction became most apparent during private family moments that unexpectedly became public. When paparazzi photographs captured Catherine having what appeared to be a stern conversation with one of her children during a public event, she faced intense media speculation about her parenting style, her emotional state, and her fitness for royal motherhood. What should have been a normal parenting moment between mother and child instead became a subject of national debate and analysis. Catherine learned that even her facial expressions during private conversations with William at public events would be scrutinized for signs of marital discord, disagreement about royal duties, or personal unhappiness. She had to master the art of maintaining appropriate royal composure even during personal moments that happened to occur in public spaces, knowing that every photographer was looking for the unguarded expression that might tell a different story than the official royal narrative. As years passed, Catherine began to understand that these 20 restrictions were not separate limitations, but interconnected elements of a comprehensive system designed to preserve the dignity, mystery, and constitutional role of the monarchy. Each restriction served multiple purposes: protecting the individual royal from personal harm, maintaining public respect for the institution, preserving diplomatic relationships, and ensuring continuity with historical tradition. The restriction on showing emotion, for example, wasn't just about maintaining dignity. It also protected Catherine from having her genuine feelings misinterpreted, prevented her from inadvertently influencing public opinion on sensitive matters, and maintained the constitutional neutrality that allows the monarchy to serve as a unifying symbol above political divisions. Similarly, the restriction on expressing personal preferences served to prevent the royal family from becoming inadvertent commercial endorsers or political influencers. Catherine's approach to managing these restrictions evolved significantly over her first decade as a royal. Initially, she focused on learning and following each rule carefully, working with palace staff to ensure she never made protocol errors that might embarrass the family or create constitutional problems. She studied historical precedents, learned from the experiences of other royal family members, and developed systems for remembering the complex web of expectations she now faced. However, as Catherine gained confidence and experience, she began to find creative ways to express authenticity within royal constraints. She discovered that while she couldn't express personal preferences directly, she could channel her genuine passions into her charitable work and public advocacy. Her deep interest in early childhood development became a major focus of her royal role, allowing her to pursue work she genuinely cared about while fulfilling her royal duties. Catherine learned to use the restriction on political expression as an opportunity to focus on issues that transcended party politics. Her work on mental health awareness, addiction recovery, and early childhood development addressed problems that affected people across all political divides, allowing her to make meaningful contributions to society while maintaining the political neutrality required of her position. The restriction on spontaneous travel led Catherine to appreciate more deeply the travel opportunities that came with royal duties. While she couldn't take impromptu vacations, her official tours allowed her to experience cultures, meet extraordinary people, and see parts of the world she might never have encountered otherwise. She learned to find adventure and personal growth within the structured framework of royal travel. Perhaps most significantly, Catherine discovered that the restriction on casual friendships had taught her to value more deeply the relationships that could survive royal protocol. The friends and family members who remained close despite the complicated requirements of maintaining relationships with a royal proved to be extraordinarily loyal and genuine. While her social circle became smaller, the relationships within it became more meaningful and authentic. Catherine's evolution in handling these restrictions became a model for how modern royalty could adapt to changing times while respecting traditional constraints. She found ways to use social media restrictions to her advantage, working with palace communications teams to share carefully curated content that felt more personal and accessible than traditional royal communications, while still maintaining appropriate dignity and privacy. The restriction on handling money led Catherine to develop innovative approaches to supporting local businesses and communities during royal visits. While she couldn't make spontaneous purchases, she could highlight small businesses through her visits, wear clothing from local designers, and use her presence to draw attention to community enterprises and charitable organizations that needed support. Catherine's management of the appearance restrictions revealed her understanding of the symbolic power of royal presentation. She began to use fashion as a form of diplomatic communication, choosing colors that honored host countries during international visits, wearing pieces by local designers to support regional economies, and recycling outfits to demonstrate responsible consumption while maintaining royal elegance. The restriction on expressing physical discomfort taught Catherine remarkable resilience and self-discipline that served her well beyond royal duties. She developed meditation and mindfulness techniques that helped her maintain composure during challenging situations, learned to pace herself during long public engagements, and discovered ways to find moments of restoration even during demanding royal schedules. Most importantly, Catherine learned to view these 20 restrictions not as limitations on her life, but as the framework within which she could build a meaningful and impactful royal career. She understood that accepting these constraints was the price of admission to a role that allowed her to influence positive change on a scale that would have been impossible in any other position. Catherine's children grew up understanding that their family operated under different rules than other families, but they also learned to see the privileges and opportunities that came with these responsibilities. She taught Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis to understand their unique position as both a burden and an extraordinary opportunity to serve others. The transformation of Catherine from a university student who could live spontaneously to a royal who operated within carefully defined constraints represents one of the most remarkable personal adaptations in modern public life. She managed to maintain her essential character and values while completely restructuring how she expressed them to fit royal requirements. Catherine's success in navigating these 20 restrictions while maintaining public affection and respect demonstrated that modern royalty could adapt to contemporary expectations while honoring historical traditions. Her approach showed that authenticity didn't require complete freedom. It could be expressed through dedication, service, and finding creative ways to pursue genuine passions within institutional constraints. As Catherine prepared for her eventual role as Queen Consort, she understood that these 20 restrictions were not temporary limitations, but permanent aspects of royal life that she would need to maintain for decades to come. However, her experience had taught her that a meaningful and fulfilling life was possible within these boundaries, and that the restrictions themselves could become tools for developing discipline, empathy, and wisdom that served both her personally and the institution she represented. The story of Catherine's adaptation to these 20 royal restrictions reveals the hidden complexity behind the glamorous facade of modern monarchy. While the public sees the beautiful gowns, exotic travels, and prestigious events, the reality involves constant self-discipline, careful consideration of every action, and the sacrifice of many freedoms that ordinary people take for granted. Catherine's grace in managing these constraints while maintaining her essential humanity has made her one of the most respected and beloved members of the royal family, proving that authenticity and restriction can coexist when approached with wisdom, dedication, and genuine commitment to service.